what role will art play? Because I was saying Gone with the Wind, HBO is gonna, they got rid of Gone with the Wind, and I was like, that's an overcorrection. The pendulum is going too far to try to eliminate something. That's silly. But art, I think there's an opportunity, because art always kind of, I think, gives us a feeling of where we are right now. What do you think is going to happen with the art world? And you're responsible for helping to usher that in with your foundation in Chicago. How is that going to play out during a pandemic, with this going on right now as well?
Well, it's very interesting that I'm not aware of the great sweep of history, but, any modern movement has art and again, good or bad, there was an artistic expression in totalitarian states like Russia or Germany or Tokyo or Japan, but also it has always been the way that people express themselves, and that's a necessary, critical component, because humans are part emotion, part psyche, part psychology, and the way that gets communicated really is through the artist. I mean, there was a word for it back in the old communist days of agitprop, the agitating proposition of the propaganda that what it can do to change the body politic, and that it does in fact need expression. So that's something, and I'll take a part of what I think is missing in this argument. And this isn't just because of George Floyd or the past year. It's that I think that this latest sort of awareness racially is missing a spiritual component that was heretofore always present in the experience of our people. It's that there was always, if not religious, there was certainly a kind of moral, ethical framing of a divine proposition involved. And I think that's missing. And I think it's missing not just from black people as well, by the way. But I think, watching the conversation, people seizing the spiritual aspect have been white evangelicals to some extent. But, that's as far as I'm concerned, we carved that territory out first, and somebody ought to be talking about it.
Why do you think there's a void? Do you think it's because we've been playing church for the last 40 years? From the mega churches to the prosperity ministries to, name it and claim it and all of this, that we actually moved away from the tenets of spirituality and moved into something more commercial?
Yes, I think that we could say that also about the artists. I think that is the commodification, like the pure celebrity politician, the celebrity preacher, there were always those kinds of people. But the whole church now is trying to get put on, is trying to have a mega ministry, is not really talking about going into the communities, into the churches directly, getting to the people directly without the endorsement of some quasi political figure. Like, Dr. King was involved in politics, very interesting man. Malcolm X was a minister. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was the leader and the founder. These are religious people who actually had tremendous psychological, spiritual, and sometimes political weight. So I think that, some people are properly motivated. I just think that there are very, very few of them right now. People are lining up with parties and agendas that have not traditionally been the framework in which we put our collective struggle. That collective struggle is as children of God, not as members of a party, not as members of a body politic. Jesus said, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God. And when you think of yourself and treat yourself as God and others, I think that it actually adjusts everything else around it. There's nothing in the Constitution that says anything about separation of church and state. It just says it will make no law about it. Therefore, I assume it makes no law against it. And I think that we really need to look at ourselves from that perspective. I think it would be more everlasting, really.
Why? I always want to know, why are you like this? And I love it. But, it's not usual that average citizens can quote the Constitution, can quote the Bible, do both with aplomb, because you've studied this not just on the stage, not just for Broadway. I imagine you probably had to do the Constitution for some role at some point. You had to memorize that. But you feel that. You embody it. What drives you, Harry Lennix, every day to want people to be better, to want this to be better?
I think it's part of my DNA. I think, it's a kind of baked into the cake quality. Like I'm a product of my environment, or a product of being raised by a widowed mother whose father died before he was 2, being raised in a community that was a real melting pot of all kinds of ideas, Polish people and black people up from the South, and Mexicans and Jews who were, still in the area. Like I grew up in the same neighborhood as Mandy Patinkin. So it was like this with the Black Panthers down the street, the Nation of Islam in the next block. Like it was everything at once. And so not to be aware was really to be putting yourself at risk. It was just good to be aware of what was going on, and in order to try to affect, some sort of efficacy, viability within it. I don't like to talk about change. I think that, that you do what it is that you are born to do, or are given to do, or demand that will be done in spite of whatever. So that was something that I guess I inherited. But in the 7th grade, in the Catholic Church, we took what was called the rite of the sacrament of confirmation. And you're like 12 or 13 years old. It's kind of, the Africans have rites of passage. Jewish faith.
Jews have the bar mitzvah, the bat mitzvah, yeah.
The bat mitzvah. And I think that for a boy like myself, if I had had that opportunity, I would have confirmed my involvement, engagement in this life and struggle. It is what I think is my birthright.
Chicago is such an interesting town. A lot of people make the Barack Obama comparison. Now I tell people Barack Obama is imitating Harry Lennix, not the other way around. He stole his style. But you talked about the Nation of Islam, Chicago. You got Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers, Chicago. So many things came out of Chicago, and it's still one of the most dangerous, violent, poor neighborhoods in the country as it relates to black people. With all of that power, why do you think that is?
Well, I can only imagine what it would be like if there were not those people. Like it would be absolute chaos. I do think that there's been a mitigating factor. I've seen it in play. I've seen it in the schools and in the churches. Like it would be any other group of people would be absolutely out of their minds, stark raving mad, would have just been bombed and written off. Like I promise you that any other people on the planet Earth would not have been able to endure the legacy that we've been able to be to go through, and to still be mostly in our right mind. It's a miracle. But that said, I think that we are in the condition that we are for reasons. That was the design, and I think that we've been placated and appeased frequently, given non-effective sugar pills, placebos, that have done nothing. They've been inert. They've had no positive impact on us because we're pretty easily led by the nose. We fall too often in love in our hearts, and we're easily swayed as a people. It's like a rudderless boat, and I think that the rudder that was taken from us are really our elders and our men in the communities when they were incarcerated or killed by any number of environmental conditions and so forth. But that has left a vacuum that God bless this black woman. She's done an amazing job.
Lori Lightfoot?
But look, I think that she's a strong mayor. I think the record is still out on her. I would have handled some things a little bit differently than she did. I did not support her. I supported Tony Preckwinkle. But again, we're choosing really between a rock and a hard place. These are both establishment Democratic loyalists. And I would like to look at somebody that doesn't have a kind of horse in the race. But I'm rooting for Lori Lightfoot. I think that she handled this pretty well. Not perfectly, but I think perfect is off the menu at the moment.
Right.
But insofar as she's done okay. Yeah.
Do you know Theaster Gates? Are you familiar?
I do. I do know.
Okay, I was watching this program on Apple TV. It's called Home, and they feature Chicago and what this man has done. And I brought it to the airways because it only takes one person to have a vision for something and the will to do it, and things can start to change. So I'm always optimistic because it only takes one person sometimes to spark. And you just brought up, George Floyd didn't want to make this sacrifice, but it took one person, something to happen to that one person for the world to now wake up. It's just interesting to me that people are just now, I didn't know that police brutality existed until last month. We've been in this country how long? And you just now, and I struggle with wanting to demonize people for being so damn ignorant and allowing for such carnage to happen over these years. Between that and maybe not being so hard on them for being so ignorant, because our education system, our entire system of racism has made that so. I struggle with that. Where should I sit on that, Harry Lennix? Should I admonish them for not knowing, or should I be compassionate and try to help them get there?
Well, I think for you, I think just you, Karen Hunter, I think you should do both. I think you do both very well. I think that you have, sometimes correction is better served, in the moment. And I also think that being patient as a former school teacher, I taught in the Chicago public school system. There were so many times I wanted to get emotional with the kids, and I would have been justified in that. They certainly needed the correction, but the patience, and remember what Mrs. Gilley told me, when she said, one of you has to be the adult. One of you has to be the adult. And so rather than sort of letting it all hang out, which is a part of it, I think that we can do it in such a way where it be constructive and everybody could, use a little bit of latitude. Everybody's made some mistakes. We all have a certain responsibility in it. But I think that when we're adults about it, that we can also give somebody a chance to redeem themselves. That's the ultimate wager for any human being, is that, okay, you get an opportunity to say, I was wrong, now let me make it right. And so let's see.